Peace and Black Power family. This is Jade Arrindell, your revolutionary, unapologetically black host right here at FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. Hey, thanks so much for coming in. I have one of my elders, one of my mentors, and a former just educator, professor, everything here. I am in Philadelphia. I am at the Dr. Molefi Kete Asante Institute for Afrocentric Studies. And this is Dr. Asante himself. So everyone say hello and greet him.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here, Jade. Thank you very much. And good.
Yes, you're welcome. So I'm here today in Philadelphia because Dr. Asante had a talk today. And I don't know if you all have been following this hashtag movement, hashtag ADOS. There's been a lot of conversations about divisiveness, anti-Blackness sentiment, anti-African sentiment, whether it's productive or not productive. And Dr. Asante has been addressing this with the long, beautiful statement that he wrote a couple weeks ago, which I read and I was inspired by. And I was like, I have to come up here today and wanted to give him space and have an opportunity to have a conversation. So, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Molefi Kete Asante, and I'm really delighted to be on the program. And it's great. I mean, we just had a wonderful hour and a half presentation at the Molefi Kete Asante Institute about the dangers of ADOS. And we started by, first of all, trying to deconstruct the name of the organization. Because for us, the notion of American descendants of slavery was itself problematic. For an organization to name itself that, since the word American itself is problematic, whether it's a historical or geographical or political term. And the fact of the matter is that black people were not American citizens until 1865, but we were enslaved as early as the 17th century. In fact, we first stepped on shore in Point Comfort, Virginia in 1619. So it's been 400 years. So it was after 1865 that African people were considered citizens. So the other problem with that name is that the only descendants of anything are either people, plants, or animal. You cannot be a descendant of slavery. Slavery doesn't have descendants. You can only have descendants who are either human or animal or plant. So the name is problematic, but it also reveals itself as being something that is quite predictably non-ingenious in terms of the way it is being approached. So here's what we have said. First of all, the idea of hostility toward black people from other places in the Caribbean or in the Americas is totally foreign to the African American history and culture. It is foreign to our ancestors, to our elders. It is certainly not something that has been embraced by N'Cobra, which is the most significant reparations organization in the black community, which was founded in 1987. It is certainly not something that Randall Robinson accepted in The Debt when he wrote it in 2000, and certainly not something that Ray Winbush, who wrote the book Should America Pay in 2003, in which I have a chapter, none of these people ever had this notion that somehow we had to be anti-African immigrant. So I think the organization is certainly anti-historical. It does not resonate with either our history or the philosophy of African people. I think it's really anti-Pan-African and anti-nationalist. I mean, basically, it's a nativistic organization.
Nativistic.
Yeah, and nativist means that they support only those people who are born in a particular place. And that's a nativistic act. It's not a nationalist act. And because nationalism is about self-determination, it's about unity of black people, it's about Pan-Africanism and so forth. So I have sought to try to get a reading on this organization, and I've discovered that it's either a Republican bot or a Russian bot. In other words, there are people who, it seems to me, have taken an aim at the African American community, and probably during the election cycle, to attack the community, to bring about division within the African American population. Yes, please.
Sure.
Okay.
Just for those folks, thank you so much,
No, that's right.
Dr. Baba. I'm going to call you Baba.
That's right,
Dr.
Baba.
Asante. For all of you all who are just coming in, you're tuning in. This is Jade Arrindell. I am your revolutionary, unapologetically black host here on Fly Nubian Queen Network, the network for melanated women and some men like you. If you're just tuning in, I am here with Dr. Molefi Kete Asante at his Institute for Afrocentric Studies here in Philadelphia, and we're talking about the anti-African sentiments of the ADOS. Dr. Asante gave a talk today, and so he was recapping a bit of that and going into specifics, you know, in terms of his position, in terms of the hashtag ADOS movement being nativistic, anti-African, and I believe I heard you say anti-black.
That's right.
So I also want to give this elder his due justice for all of the work that he's put into the game, all the skin that he's put into the game. Dr. Asante has written like over 100 books. He has done so much work over the years, over decades, within the community in terms of Pan-Africanism and coining the phrase Afrocentricity and defining what it means to be Afrocentric. What really compels me to come up here and have this conversation with you today, Dr. Asante, is that I remember the first time I met you when I was in high school, and you spoke to a youth group that I was in. It was a youth group. It was a youth group that consisted of African American and American Jewish, which were white high school students. And the premise was to study the relationship between blacks and Jews during the Civil Rights Movement. And we came to Temple University on a tour, and I was so inspired by your work, and I had heard about your work growing up around Pan-Africanists in my hometown of Washington, D.C., that I decided to come to Temple University and study in African American studies. So I want to put that out there. So Dr. Asante has been in the game. He's been doing the research. You're highly cited and quoted. And so I just want to thank you for, you know, your contributions. And I feel that, you know, as a scholar, it's so important that folks who are listening to this sort of propaganda that has come out of the ADOS movement that's happening on social media, it's important that we really go to elders who have done the work and actually know what they're talking about, but also coming from an African-centered perspective. I think there's an information gap in terms of what Eurocentricity is and what those paradigms are and what Afrocentricity and African ways of thinking and being and doing and existing are, which are harmonious, which are, you know, within unity. And it was so interesting that you brought up the word nativistic. I would like you to define that for the audience, and then I think you were making some other points about there's some sort of political manipulation that could be used in the ADOS movement to push an agenda.
Well, thank you so much, and I would say to your audience that, this is not grandiose. It is true. You were one of our best students.
Thank you.
And I'm delighted that I have the opportunity to be on your program. And I've only written 84 books.
Oh, okay. Well, in articles and everything else.
I want anybody to go out there saying I've written 100. I'm hoping to do 100, you know. But here's the thing about nativism. You see, this is contrary to our history. And I'm so happy you mentioned the whole idea of history. Because after all, we, the black population in the United States is comprised of people who were taken from over 100 different ethnic groups. Yoruba, Igbo, Wolof, Ewe, Mandinka, Angola, Congo, Fanti, Asante, Ibibio, Serere, Bamileke, etc., etc. We are a composite of all Africa. That's who we are. So we have never had, not even from the very beginning, we have never had this anti-black sentiment in the sense of that these are black people, so we have to be different, and we can't we can't share with them. Nativism itself always says that we're the ones who are born here, and since we're born here, we have a special right. My thing about that is that, yeah, that's an accident of history that we're born here, but all black people in the Americas share in the same history of brutality, enslavement, being used as chattels in the sense of property by people. So we can't necessarily go in the same direction that the reactionary whites are going in. And what this organization, ADOS, seems to be doing is really imitating the same rhetoric and the same ideas of the Trump administration, which is basically anti-immigrant. And so the attempt is to push African people, black people, African people in this country to the same position. This is quite divisive. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think that there are two elements to it. One is the reparations thing that they claim that they need to identify basically who's going to get paid, when in fact all of us should be paid, even the African nations.
Cut the check.
Yeah, that's right.
Cut the check.
No.
Yep.
And as an African born here in Georgia, I have the great sense that the nobility of the African American population is unquestioned. I don't question it. I don't think anybody can question what we have achieved and done. But by the same token, we've also achieved a great sense of grace, so that we have accepted and embraced all other African people. So the reparations thing is one. The other part is the election. I think that Senator Kamala Harris probably brought out the most negative aspects of this this assault by ADOS, mainly because of ethnicity, because of her father being Jamaican and her mother being Indian. This is why these Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore are both from California, and they come out of this bag of attacking people who they claim are not born here, are not from here, are not descendants of slavery. It's a very, very strange thing. I think that people can have a political disagreement with Senator Harris, perhaps, or a discussion with her about how she treated African Americans in the justice system in California, but I don't think you can have an argument about her ethnicity, because we have claimed in our population, Jade, we have claimed Marcus Garvey, we have claimed my former good friend, my late good friend Kwame Ture, who is from Trinidad. Garvey was from Jamaica. Yes. Belafonte, we certainly claim. I claim Ilan Omar, who is of a Somali background. I claim Nipsey Hussle, who was of Eritrean background. This is Black America. I mean, what are you talking about? Black America has always been the most progressive segment of the American population.
I'm going to add a couple of things.
Please.
I want to say, hey everybody, thank you for tuning in. Yes, I'm here with Dr. Molefi, Kete, Asante in Philadelphia. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. I am Jade Arrindell, your revolutionary, unapologetically Black host right here on this network. And make sure you go ahead and text the word Queens to 31996. That's Queens with an S to 31996, and that way you can go get direct alerts to your phone when we go live. And make sure you visit flynubianmoney.com and flynubianbusiness.com, so we can continue to be in the conversation of building cooperative Black economics. One thing I do want to respond to you. I have been hearing a lot of the discourse that has been coming out about our brothers and sisters of African descent from different parts of the diaspora. And some of those arguments about like when our folks who are coming from colonized countries are coming over to the United States, there is a sentiment of anti-Black American, there is some contention there. Do you want to speak to that? Because
Yes,
I've experienced it. And I've probably also been perpetrated something unknowingly.
Sure.
And I always see those differences between us and our brothers and sisters from the diaspora in America as manifestations of our oppression.
Well, you were perfectly right, and you certainly have an Afrocentric interpretation of that. It is a manifestation of oppression, and it's a manifestation of oppression on both sides. See, I always, and I spoke on this earlier today. I lived in Africa. I lived in Zimbabwe, and I visit Africa 3 or 4 times a year. So I recognize the tension that exists sometimes, but I think sometimes we bring tension as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure that sometimes people from the former colonies of Europe have some of the same baggage that we have in terms of how they look at other African people. The notion of divide and rule was fundamental to European doctrine. I mean, their whole doctrine was that's how you do. You split them up. You split up the Hutu and the Tutsi. You split up the Zulu and the Shona. You do everything you can to keep them away and keep them hating on each other. And so in the African American context, many times there are African Americans who say, I don't think that these people who are coming from Nigeria or Ghana, I don't see how they relate to us, and they don't relate to us well. They seem to relate more to white people. So I've heard this sentiment. Well, all of that has to do with colonial oppression.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with what is real. And if you get to know people, and I always tell people, I never have any problems with people from the continent or the Caribbean. I'm in Haiti, I'm in Jamaica, I'm in Guadeloupe, Martinique. I'm total Pan-African. I'm comfortable in Barbados as I am in Colombia or Brazil. To me, we're all Africans, and we all have experienced 500 years of Eurocentric and European oppression. And how to deal with it is all of our problem. And the 45 million Black people who are here, I salute us, and I salute all of us in all of our different dimensions.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And also, in case anyone is wondering, I too have multiple generations of lineage on all sides that I can really trace back from the United States of America. So, and I'm not even a 2nd or 3rd generation college student. I'm probably like a 5th generation, college graduate, and ancestry that goes back pre-1800s, and names of plantations, lots and lots of genealogy. I want to have a live discussion on that, but I also do want to speak to the education gap that comes out of, it's a manifestation of all of our oppression within the diaspora, but especially coming out of former African colonies, and also West Indian, former West Indian colonies. Those educational systems many of them have not yet been revamped, and there's a lot of missing history about the Black American experience. And so, can we really blame our brothers and sisters from the diaspora who are coming over here without a lot of knowledge about European slavery, and also a lack of knowledge that comes out of countries about their own colonization, because those things have been deliberately kept away from our people within schools all over the planet.
Sure, you are perfectly right, Jade. In fact, in Brazil, what they did after the period of enslavement in the 1880s was to actually burn all the books about the history of the enslavement itself. So you cannot even find books that are written about the enslavement in Brazil, you see, prior to the, before the emancipation. And in Colombia, basically the same thing happened. They basically wiped out all of the information for the African people. So they don't know, but then we don't know. I mean, we just had a big debate here today about why is it that in these big cities in the U.S., we don't have African history or African American history taught in the public schools. And many of these schools are run by black people. So we're talking about the lack of consciousness and the lack of knowledge on all parts.
Yeah.
And I think that this is something that we will have to deal with.
Absolutely. I have two more questions for you. I know you've been talking
Sure.
and teaching and doing everything all day, so
That's
I really
right.
do appreciate
Thank
you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I also want to say, hey everybody, thank you for tuning into FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. Here with Dr. Molefi Kete Asante, who is a legend, and we're talking about the hashtag ADOS movement and anti-African sentiments, and Dr. Asante is setting people straight with the truth. A question that I have for you: can you name several of the most disturbing talking points or narratives that have come out of the hashtag ADOS movement?
Well, the one that I think disturbs me the most is the notion that somehow the African Americans are the only blacks who have been Jim Crowed. Well, that is a specific thing. I mean, perhaps in Brazil they didn't call it Jim Crow. Maybe they called it something else. Maybe in Haiti when Mackendal and Bootman, later in Brazil, when they were fighting against the oppressive conditions that the French had laid upon them, maybe they called it some other kind of savagery. So these are common experiences. They're different in the sense that we have specific histories, but if you take the oppressive nature of white racial capitalist hierarchy and hegemony and domination, we are fighting the same battle.
Fighting the same battle. Thank you. And what would you say about the movement for reparations here in America for people who are indigenous, black folks who are indigenous to America, I guess, over generations versus those within the diaspora?
Well, I always say that my family also goes deep into Georgia, maybe 6 or 7 generations into Georgia. And so I'm particularly interested in that history, the history of the Africans in America, in these United States. However, I don't see that as separate from the entire reparations struggle. And this is why Cobra was so progressive when they started in 1987, because they saw reparations as an international activity. That the reparations should not just be for people in the United States, but for black people in Brazil, in Mexico, in Haiti. I mean, Haiti was totally robbed. Jamaica, or in the African continent itself. I mean, the nations that supplied Europe with its gold and copper to create the Industrial Revolution, all those nations were robbed not just of mineral resources, but of human resources. The reparations is not a specific thing to a particular nation. It is an international problem. And that's why the whole world should be engaged in this discourse. And it should not be a discourse just limited to a small group of isolated nativistic African Americans claiming something that the people, for example, cannot claim or should not claim if they're in Argentina or in Brazil. I mean, I think that's not correct. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, final question, Dr. Asante, Baba Asante, I'm going to call him Baba. What do you want us to do? What do you want the younger generation of people of African descent, black folks, to do moving forward to shift the narrative?
But I think it's important, and let me just tell you why it's important for us to shift the narrative. And again, back to this issue, I guess it touched me because my wife is born in Costa Rica,
Yeah.
and she is of she's African descent, and she has a Jamaican heritage, but she's black, and she sees herself as African American. So I want us to ask a fundamental question, one that Hakeem Madhubuti, the great poet, used to ask, and it impacted me greatly. And that is, whatever we do as young people, as youth, engaged in this discourse, even in a debate, is this in the best interest of black people? That's all you have to ask. If you answer that question, is this in the best interest of African or black people, then you will have a direction for the future.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Jade.
Dr. Asante. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This is a conversation that's not going to end now. We'll continue to build unity. We'll continue to engage in discourse and do something that's progressive and forward moving for our community. So once again, I'm Jade Arrindell, your revolutionary, unapologetically black host here at FlyNubianQueen.com, the network for melanated women like you. I'm wrapping up today's segment with Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. This segment is ending, as is global white supremacy. In order to slew this beast, make sure you carry with you a spirit of fortitude, preparedness, and collectivism. Before I log off, I want to give you the final word. How can we keep in touch with you? How can we follow you, Dr. Asante?
You can keep in touch with me by my Facebook and my Twitter accounts, but certainly my Facebook is probably the best.
Okay.
You can follow me at Father of Afrocentricity.
Father of
Afrocentricity.
Afrocentricity. Is that on Instagram or is that Facebook?
Facebook.
Facebook. Absolutely. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I will be back.
Thank you.
And this is a beautiful space that you have.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, you all.
Thank you.